Developer 343 Industries returns after a 6-year wait. 6 years since Halo 5 Guardians to give us Halo Infinite in its open world splendor. It's been worth the wait too. Halo Infinite saw a whole 1-year delay from its originally planned release date of late 2020. We've had early builds to test, just a couple of missions, and of course multiplayer betas too, but today we have the entire campaign mode to test. Perhaps the most mysterious part of the package, with the most questions attached to it. Built on the team's Slipspace engine, Halo Infinite's campaign dares to redefine what a Halo game is. It gives you freedom to explore a massive terrain as you please, to grapple hook across its huge map, to tackle missions out of order with ally NPCs or vehicles picked up en route. But then also, Halo Infinite refines a well-loved formula. The series' classic shooting mechanics, the trifecta of guns, melee, and grenades, is fine-tuned to give the best moment-to-moment action I've seen in any Halo game to date. All combined, it's turned into something quite special. My good friend and colleague John Linneman goes into much more detail about the tech and design of Halo Infinite's campaign in an exhaustive deep dive piece. My focus today though, well, for this video, I'm picking apart the console experience, comparison stuff. The Xbox One, One X, Series S and X all compared for your viewing pleasure. Because, to be honest, for all the revolution Halo Infinite brings in opening out its mission structure to an open world, it's still also a cross-gen game. Those 6 years of development mean 343 always had older Xbox One and One X hardware in mind, hardware released as long ago as 2013, and so scalability is essential. With that in mind, is Halo Infinite really the next-gen Halo we've been waiting for? Also, we've seen an early preview build on Series X and S, but having base Xbox One in action is all new territory for us at DF. Does Xbox One run at a solid 30 FPS with acceptable visuals? Or is the One X the bare minimum for the ideal Halo Infinite experience? How do visuals compare between all four? And what of loading times? I've done the digging, resolutions, frame rates, everything. Let's get started. To answer these questions, we have Halo Infinite served two ways. First, there's the two opening missions, each more traditional Halo levels. Master Chief wakes to a fortress of parallaxed metal floors and monolithic structures, blasting enemies with battle rifles and needlers while introducing a new grappling hook mechanic. Consider it a tutorial of sorts with plot exposition ahead of Halo Infinite's second big reveal. It's here we see the Slipspace engine pushed hard on every Xbox console. Trees, mountain ranges, enemy bases are rendered far to the distance. There's a rolling time of day, randomized cloud cover, and even volumetric techniques to add depth to the scene. When it comes to assessing the base Xbox One especially, it's this expansive part of Halo Infinite that poses the biggest challenge. So, how does it hold up? Starting with base Xbox One here, let's go straight for the jugular with performance and resolution stats. All four machines, Xbox One, One X, Series S and X, use a dynamic resolution plus a temporal reconstruction method to boost image clarity within a frame. And, well, Xbox One's really no exception. The resolution target is 1920 by 1080 with a 30 FPS cap here. There's no performance quality mode toggle on Xbox One as there is on the other Xbox machines. This is really it. 1080p 30 is your lot. DRS is used to adjust the resolution, my lowest count coming in at 1280 by 720 in this first big battle on Zeta Halo, just as we throw this grenade. Typically it's 1080p roaming around though, but the tower battle, the first big mission, shows drops to between 1080p and 720p. All round, the resulting image on Xbox One is as strong as it can be. The reconstruction method cleans up the rough edges, and the DRS system tries to push the highest resolution image possible at any point. Still though, and as you can see, a 720p lower bound gives a limited pixel count for Xbox One to resolve fine detail on trees or even enemies at range. Visually speaking, Xbox One is respectable given the 2013 origin of its hardware. We'll get to image comparisons to One X and beyond later in this video, but fundamentally 343 Industries built Halo Infinite with base Xbox One in mind. It's not ideal, let's be clear. Texture quality and filtering run at a low preset, leading to an extreme blur to flawed detail. Foliage pops in close to the camera too, while a shadow cascade is always in clear view. Nevertheless, the world is still intact. Xbox One pushes an acceptable baseline experience. The real downside? Well, that's in Xbox One's performance at 30 FPS, and it's not so much the 30 FPS cap itself, which is usually solid on our frame rate graph as you can see. No, rather it's the fact Halo Infinite runs with inconsistent frame pacing, creating a kind of trill on the frame time graph on left. It creates the sense of frame rate drops even if 30 FPS is the on-screen average. Add in the hitches while travelling fast in vehicles, and Xbox One's performance really stands out as a distraction. The base Xbox One struggles to turn in a smooth experience, but again, visually it does at least get a passing grade, as an entry-level way to play Halo Infinite. So, as it stands right now, what's the state of the next level up hardware-wise, the Xbox One X? Does Xbox One X offer the most affordable way to play Halo Infinite at a stable 30 FPS, or better still 60 FPS? Luckily, One X offers two modes in a menu toggle. The first is a quality mode that caps at 30 FPS, with a 4K resolution target too. As you can expect, DRS is in play, dropping us from a full 4K down to around 2400 by 1440 depending on GPU load. It works as you can expect really. You get the lowest pixel counts in battle, but traversal holds closer to around 1800p. And as you can see, quality mode allows Xbox One X to hold to 30 FPS pretty much perfectly throughout. Except, yes, with the same frame pacing issue as the base Xbox One here. No question, Xbox One X looks great on that quality mode. A dynamic 1080p on the base machine goes up to a dynamic 4K, itself a huge advantage for visibility. Especially in the open world, the jump to a 6 teraflop GPU pays off handsomely. Texture quality is boosted too on Master Chief's helmet during his initial jump, and zooming in by 3 times, we see it again on skin shaders and texturing for other characters, and all across the metal framing of the guns. I'm glad to say shadow quality gets a bump too. Being careful to match the time of day, One X reduces the dithering to shadow edges we see on the base Xbox One. Also, ambient occlusion under plants is improved with a thicker form of the effect. Now, of course, variable cloud coverage can skew the comparisons, but shadows and textures appear to be the most tangible upgrade between these two. Keeping to the comparisons here, there are a few other neat touches for One X. Geometry LODs for terrain use higher grade meshes nearer to the player, reducing pop-in overall. We also see details like rocks render at range. Tree draw in the far distance is also enhanced, though it's worth stressing foliage in the near to mid-range is identical between One and One X in this run forward shot. All round, it's clear base Xbox One is treated as, well, the baseline standard for the game's visual makeup. One that's augmented on higher powered systems, at higher resolutions, improving shadows, textures, and adding small details to the distance. Playing on base Xbox One shows just how scalable the engine is, but again you are stuck at sub 1080p and 30 FPS with uneven frame pacing. Sadly, even Xbox One X can't escape the frame pacing issue on its quality mode, giving a juddering sensation to camera pans. It's made worse by a lack of any motion blur at all, though the hitching while travelling is at least reduced. Now thankfully, One X has a simple solution to this, an option for 60 FPS via its performance mode toggle. Performance mode on One X is without doubt the recommended of the two modes. Yes, there are visual sacrifices to get there, but it's worth it. Resolution is the key drawback, but it's not too severe overall. You drop from a dynamic 4K in quality mode down to a dynamic 1440p in performance mode. DRS is invoked heavily as you'd expect in big battles, giving One X a lower bounds of 1280 by 720, but typically it's at numbers in between. I've also got to say comparing the two modes reveals only the most subtle tweaks in settings. shadow quality and small LOD tweaks for the most part. The trade-off? You get a mostly locked 60 FPS on One X, albeit with frame rates at times going between 45 to 60 in the open world. So it's not perfect, but this is still preferable to the uneven frame pacing on quality mode, and of course, those opening 2 interior missions run just fine. Of all Xbox systems, One X is the only one to struggle to hit a frame rate target of 60 FPS, but it's still very playable. Next up, let's jump a whole generation to Xbox Series S. Starting with quality mode, there's a twist here. Image quality on Series S is undoubtedly worse than the One X. Quality mode targets 30 FPS with, yes, a locked 30 FPS and uneven frame pacing much like One X. However, the resolution fixes at 1920 by 1080 even on quality mode. 1080p is practically locked with barely any signs of DRS, but still side-by-side comparisons aren't exactly flattering. Check out this battle of the mid-tier Xbox machines. One X enjoys up to 4K resolution in quality mode and up to 4 times leap over Series S's 1080p on the equivalent mode. I really hope this can be updated. Settings wise, near to far foliage draw is identical between these two, as is the quality of texture filtering, depth of field, and even shadows. There are differences too, if minor. Trees render slightly further on Xbox One X towards the distance, though really hard to spot without a 3x zoom like this. Most curious is the texture differences between these two. Now, in most cases, both consoles are matched, barring odd issues with streaming. Here at the spawn point though, Xbox Series S uses a different asset to One X entirely. Looking directly down at our feet, the time of day and cloud coverage are matched, and yet Series S's texture appears to be a high contrast texture variation. Tellingly, the Series S texture here is the same one as used on the more powerful Series X, but presented at a lower 1080p resolution window. The result is One X on left is the sharper and cleaner of the two by running at a dynamic 4K, but it's an example of actual texture quality differing between the generations, one that may well be in favour of Series S overall. Sticking with Series S, the performance mode again comes highly recommended. 60 FPS is unlocked, and in terms of resolution it targets 1920 by 1080 at max, with a drop to 1706 by 960 lowest. Variable rate shading is also used here, adjusting the resolution of points of the image, in theory helping to bolster performance. The payoff? A mostly perfect 60 FPS. It's superb, and while the resolution range is lower than One X, it's a far more consistent performer. Sacrificing a more dynamic 1080p to hit 60 FPS is an absolute great trade for this console. Much like One X, settings changes in shadows and tree LODs compared to Series S's quality mode are barely noticeable as well. At this point, it's worth noting previous builds on Series S showed a 120Hz performance mode and had 60 FPS for its quality mode, but in the final game it's changed to a 30-60 FPS split. 120 FPS is seriously missed. I've got to say, I hope the team at 343 find a way to bring it back to Series S. All of which brings us to Xbox Series X, the 12 teraflop machine that would expect to show Halo Infinite at its very best on console. We have the quality mode on show here, but unlike One X and Series S, you'll notice it guns for a full 60 FPS rather than 30. For resolution metrics, quality mode also targets 3840 by 2160 at peak, with big battles dropping pixel counts down to a low of 2240 by 1440. Everything in between is possible, though typically Series X renders at the higher end of the 4K scale. In many respects, this is basically the same as One X's quality mode in settings, except it runs at 60 FPS rather than 30. And impressively, it's a near locked 60 FPS too, with only the briefest of single drop frames during open world traversal. All this is achieved with DRS, plus variable rate shading on select elements of the screen, much like Series S. In practice, comparing One X, Series S and Series X all together, it truly gets the best of both worlds in quality mode. Series X renders a 4K image that's less reliant on DRS than One X. You also get 60 FPS as standard, and not only that, Series X also uses the high-grade texture seen on Series S while looking down at this spawn point. Most other settings are hard to pick apart. Shadow resolution, foliage draw, and effects all fixed at similar presets between the three. Even zooming close, the shadow cascade in the slow walk forward, for example, triggers at exactly the same range. Plants up ahead also draw in at the same point. So mostly the Series X advantage is in having a dynamic 4K at 60 FPS, which is impressive enough. And yet, there's one extra big advantage for Series X in its performance mode, a mode that uniquely opens the gates to 120Hz gameplay. Rendering Halo Infinite at 120 FPS inevitably comes at a cost. Series X in performance mode runs at 2560 by 1440 at peak, bottoming out at around 1564 by 960 in battles. A majority of traversal and indoor missions run at 120 FPS no problem. We're seeing minor dips under at these points. That said, performance can fluctuate more wildly in battle. We hit the 80 FPS mark, for example, while driving a Warthog with multiple NPCs on board here, dipping just into the high 70s as we turn into a valley. As an absolute low, it's still acceptable, and most missions fly through at above 100 FPS. In terms of the trade-off, a drop to a dynamic 1440p does enough. Comparing to the quality mode, we also appear to have the same shadows, though again distant tree draw is slightly worsened. On the whole, it's incredible to play a Halo game in a dense open world at a full 120 FPS, and it's a huge distinction for Series X to have the option. There's one last area to tackle for Halo Infinite on Xbox. Loading times are a huge factor in playing the game, with fast travel being added to quickly get around its giant map. All round, it appears Series X and S absolutely dominate last-gen consoles in getting from A to B here. Let's start with the initial one-off load to the game world, after booting the app. From the main menu, Series X gets to gameplay after 12.6 seconds, Series S at 16.7, but then we have to wait a full minute for last-gen machines, 59 seconds on One X, and 1 minute 1 second on base Xbox One. Thankfully, there's not as much of a wait after booting the game and using fast travel. Selecting the FOB Golf hub, you get a good loading time advantage on newer consoles, 2.8 seconds on Series X, but then it's only an 8 to 9 second wait for the likes of Xbox One and One X by comparison. There's a big current gen advantage to booting the game then, but afterwards all consoles load areas in at a respectable speed. That's the complete console breakdown, Halo Infinite across 4 Xbox platforms and 2 modes. Clearly, scalability is built at the heart of its engine. In effect, I'd strongly recommend Xbox One X at a minimum for a great campaign experience, especially running at 60 FPS. Of course, Series X augments what's there with 4K 60 and 120 FPS modes too, plus improved loading times on Series consoles. These are obviously great features, but the core of the game is surprisingly similar across all 4. In that sense, it's surprising how much base Xbox One achieves on vintage 2013 hardware. I hope 343 Industries addresses some issues though, specifically the frame pacing for 30 FPS modes, but otherwise, Halo Infinite is in a great place. The addition of co-op support would take it to a new level, as would more biomes, areas to explore in future, and hopefully it's something we'll see for future expansions. For now though, Halo Infinite's bold new direction is something to celebrate, marking it as one of 2021's very best shooters. But that's all I have time for today. If you did enjoy this look at Halo Infinite's campaign, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell, of course, to get notifications as any new video lands. To get a high quality version of this video, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch with me or the rest of the team directly, just use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching.